Don't look at him again. Do you understand me? Don't look at him. His voice was a smile. His hand on her wrist was not. She looked anyway. Across a crowded airport terminal through 200 oblivious strangers, her eyes found one man, not a cop, not a friend, not anyone who was supposed to save her. A man with cold eyes and a darker reputation. And she pressed 2 fingers against her collarbone. Slowly, deliberately. A signal so quiet it could have meant nothing. To Grayson Wolf, it meant everything. He had ignored that signal once before. He was 17 years old. He never forgave himself. He wasn't ignoring it today. If this story just stopped your heart, subscribe right now, drop your city in the comments, and don't you dare leave before the end. Because what Grayson does next will change everything. The morning Grayson Wolf almost walked past Adeline Cole, he was running exactly 4 minutes behind schedule, which for a man who treated punctuality like a moral position, felt like a personal failure. He moved through Terminal C with the focused efficiency of someone who had learned early and permanently that hesitation was just another word for danger. His security lead, Marcus, was 12 feet ahead, clearing a path without appearing to. 2 more men flanked the perimeter, invisible to everyone else. Standard. He had a meeting in Chicago in 5 hours. 3 agenda items. 0 patience for deviation. Then he heard it. Not a scream, not a crash, nothing dramatic enough to turn heads. Just a voice, low, smooth, the kind of voice that had probably charmed every room it had ever entered, saying 6 words that rearranged the entire morning. I said, don't make me repeat myself. Grayson's stride didn't break, but his eyes moved. 2 rows of gray airport seats. Gate 14. A man in a charcoal jacket, late 30s, gold watch, the particular posture of someone who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. And beside him, a young woman, barely 20, small-framed, long-sleeved blouse on a warm June morning, who was nodding with the practiced speed of someone who had learned that agreeing quickly was how you reduce the damage. Grayson kept walking. He almost made it to the jet bridge door. Then she looked up. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't panic. It was something quieter and far more devastating, the look of a person who had already run through every exit in their head and found them all locked. She swept the terminal once, fast and methodical, the way a drowning person scans for anything solid. Her eyes moved through a businessman on his phone, a mother with a stroller, a gate agent behind a desk, and then they stopped. On him. For exactly 2 seconds, Adeline Cole looked directly at Grayson Wolf, and then she pressed 2 fingers slowly, carefully against her collarbone. His chest stopped. He knew that signal. Not from training, not from briefings, from a kitchen that smelled like burned coffee and his mother's silence 26 years ago when he was 17 years old and had no idea what he was seeing until it was too late to matter. He had spent the better part of his adult life being very good at a great many things. That was the one failure he had never been able to bury deep enough. He turned around. Marcus appeared at his shoulder within 3 seconds, quiet, alert, reading the shift in Grayson's body language, the way he'd learned to over 11 years. What is it? Gate 14, Grayson said, without pointing, without looking directly. Man in the gray jacket, run him. We're about to board. Then run him fast. Marcus peeled away without another word. Grayson changed his angle and drifted toward a coffee kiosk 8 feet from the couple. He ordered a black coffee he had no intention of drinking and positioned himself with his back, 3/4 turned, using the reflection in the kiosk's chrome panel to watch without watching. The man Grayson was already thinking of him as the suit, the way he categorized threats quickly and cleanly, had his hand on the woman's elbow now. Not holding her, just resting it there, the way you'd rest a hand on something you owned. Smile, the suit said quietly. People are looking. The woman smiled. It reached nowhere near her eyes. That's my girl, the suit said. Grayson's back teeth pressed together. He paid for the coffee and took 3 steps to his left, close enough now that he was within earshot, angled, so that only the woman could see his face if she looked up. He waited, counted. 12 seconds. She looked up. He held up 2 fingers, the same 2 she'd pressed to her collarbone, and then turned his palm outward. I see you, her breath hitched. The suit was checking his phone and missed it entirely. Grayson tilted his head toward the far quarter. Can you move? She gave the smallest shake of her head, barely a millimeter. He nodded once. Okay, I'm not leaving. She looked away before the suit looked up from his phone. Boarding in 10 minutes, the suit announced to no one in particular. Go get me a water. Sparkling, no ice. She rose immediately, reaching for her bag. Leave the bag, he said, still looking at his phone. She left the bag and walked toward the nearest vending area, which happened to be in Grayson's direction. He didn't move. He watched her approach and waited until she was close enough, her back to the suit, the ambient noise of the terminal, wrapping them in just enough cover. She stopped at the vending machine beside him. Her hands were shaking as she pressed the buttons. You don't have to pretend right now, Grayson said quietly. Not a whisper. Whispers drew attention. Just a murmur, the register of a private conversation. He can't see your face from there. She exhaled long and careful, like releasing pressure from something that had been sealed too tight. You shouldn't have done that, she said. Her voice was steadier than he expected. The signal. If he saw, he didn't. You don't know that. I do, Grayson said. I've been watching him for 4 minutes. He watches his phone more than he watches you. He thinks he doesn't need to watch you. Something moved across her face, too fast to name completely. Part of it was recognition. What's your name? He asked. A pause. Adeline. Grayson. He didn't offer his hand, too visible. How long? Her jaw tightened. 8 months, she said finally. 8 months. Grayson kept his face neutral. Inside, something old and heavy shifted in his chest. Do you have anyone in Chicago? He asked. No. Family. He doesn't let me. She stopped, corrected herself with the practiced precision of someone who had learned not to say certain things out loud. We moved around a lot. I lost touch. The vending machine beeped. The sparkling water dropped. She reached for it, and her sleeve pulled back 2 inches. Grayson didn't stare. He just saw, and he looked back at the kiosk counter and said very quietly, I'm on your flight. She froze. I'm going to be on that plane, he continued, same tone, unhurried. When we land, I'm going to have people waiting. Good people. A woman named Lena. She is going to be at the bottom of the jet bridge with a blue lanyard and a coffee cup. All you have to do is walk toward her. Adeline turned to look at him fully for the first time. Up close, her eyes were dark brown and exhausted in a way that went bone deep. Not the exhaustion of lost sleep, but the exhaustion of sustained hypervigilance of living every hour slightly braced for impact. She was studying him the way people study exits. Why, she asked. It was the right question. He respected her for asking it. Because you asked me, he said. I don't know you. No. You could be worse than him. I could be, Grayson said evenly. I'm not, but I understand if that doesn't mean much right now. The boarding announcement cut through the terminal, first class and families. She looked back toward gate 14. The suit was standing now, gathering the bags, both of them, because of course, and scanning the area with the calibrated alertness of a man checking inventory. I have to go back, she said. I know. She took 3 steps away, then stopped without turning around. Her voice dropped to the level of breath. He's going to know something's different. He always knows. Then be exactly the same as you've been, Grayson said. For 40 more minutes, just 40. She didn't respond. She walked back toward the gate, sparkling water in hand, spine straight, face smoothed into the careful blankness she'd been practicing for 8 months. The suit took the bottle without looking at her and went back to his phone. Grayson's phone buzzed. Marcus. Richard Calloway, 38, commercial real estate, Atlanta. Clean surface. But I'm looking at a sealed filing from Fulton County 2021. Domestic. Complainant withdrew inside 72 hours. In Grayson, there's a missing persons inquiry from 2022. Different woman. Case went cold. Grayson read it twice. Different woman. He typed back, get Lena to O'Hare. Bottom of concourse 8 jet bridge. Blue lanyard. She's looking for a woman named Adeline. 20 dark hair, cream blouse. Get her out before Calloway clears the gate. Marcus. He's going to make noise. Grayson, let him. He boarded last in his group after a quick, quiet word with the gate agent that had nothing to do with seat assignments and everything to do with making sure his new seat was directly across the aisle from 14B and 14C. Marcus had handled the reservation swap in under 7 minutes. He settled in, adjusted his jacket, looked straight ahead. The suit took 14B aisle seat. Adeline was in 14C window, boxed in. She didn't look at Grayson when she sat down. Good instinct. The suit ordered whiskey before they'd even finished boarding. When the flight attendant turned to Adeline, he spoke first. "She's fine." Adeline's hands were flat on her thighs. Grayson placed a folded napkin on the edge of his tray, angled just far enough that she could read it without moving her head. "You are not alone on this flight. Don't react. Don't look at me. Just breathe." He watched her in the peripheral edge of his vision. It took 3 minutes. Her eyes drifted carefully, slowly to the napkin. She read it. He watched the muscles in her jaw loosen by a fraction. Just a fraction. But it was there. The suit's elbow found the shared armrest. He took it completely, pushing Adeline's arm off, without comment, without awareness, without any indication that he registered her as a person occupying separate physical space. She moved her arm into her own lap and said nothing. Grayson looked at the napkin again, then wrote 4 more words on the corner and re-angled it. "Can you get out?" This time she read it in under a second, and then she made the barest, most controlled movement. Her chin dipped once. "Half an inch." "Yes." His phone buzzed. He glanced down. Marcus Lena's confirmed, but Grayson Calloway's registered to a private security firm in Atlanta. He's got a firearms carry permit. He's not going to let her walk. Grayson looked across the aisle. The suit had his earbuds in, now tablet out, completely absorbed. Adeline sat 3 inches away from him, motionless, staring at the seat back pocket in front of her, with the hollow focus of someone who had learned to exist in very small spaces inside themselves. He looked back at his phone and typed, "He's not going to have to let her. By the time he realizes she's gone, she'll already be in the car." Marcus, and if he comes after her. Grayson set his phone face down on the tray. If Richard Calloway came after her, he would have a very short, very unpleasant conversation with 2 men who had collectively spent 30 years ensuring that people like Grayson Wolfe were never inconvenienced by people like Richard Calloway. That wasn't something he needed to type. Marcus already knew. What Grayson was thinking about instead was Adeline's face at the vending machine. The way she'd corrected herself mid-sentence, "He doesn't let me, we moved around a lot." The way 8 months of conditioning had built an entire internal censorship system so automatic, she didn't even notice it operating. The way she'd asked why and meant it genuinely, because some part of her still needed the world to make sense, still needed there to be a reason, still hadn't let go of the reflex to understand things. That reflex mattered. It meant she wasn't broken. Bent, yes. Compressed by the weight of what she'd been living inside. But not broken. He had seen broken. He knew the difference. The pilot's voice filled the cabin, 40 minutes to O'Hare's smooth descent expected. The suit shifted in his seat without removing his earbuds, reached sideways, and placed his hand over Adeline's, not warmly, not the way a person touches someone they love. The way a person touches something they don't want to move. Her eyes didn't close. She just stared forward. And under his hand, beneath the surface of everything, she had trained herself not to show her fingers were shaking. Grayson looked away. He pulled out a second napkin, wrote carefully, folded it once, and when the flight attendant came through collecting cups, he caught her eye and held the napkin out with 2 fingers and said quietly enough that the suit couldn't hear over his earbuds, "Seat 14C, please." The attendant looked at him for a beat, then at Adeline. Then she took the napkin. He watched her work her way down the aisle with practiced casualness. Cups here, a blanket there, until she reached row 14, and in one smooth motion slid the folded napkin under the edge of Adeline's tray while retrieving a cup. The suit didn't look up. Adeline waited 90 seconds, 90 deliberate, controlled seconds, and then she lowered her hand and found the napkin by touch alone. She unfolded it slowly in her lap, tilted fractionally away from the suit. Grayson had written 6 words, Lena. Blue lanyard, walk, don't stop. He watched her read it again, and then just barely, just for a half second, in the careful, guarded face of a woman who had forgotten what safety felt like, something cracked and open. Not tears, not yet, just the first trembling edge of belief. The belief that 40 minutes from now, everything might actually be different. Grayson turned back to the window. 40,000 feet below Chicago stretched out under breaking clouds, gray and enormous, and full of every possible kind of beginning. He had made promises in his life he hadn't kept. He had walked past things he should have stopped. He had built an entire existence, on the principle that sentiment was a liability and other people's suffering was not his equation to solve. He had told himself that story for 20 years. He was tired of it. 40 minutes, he thought. Outside the scratched oval window, the clouds were thinning. They were already descending. The wheels hit the tarmac at O'Hare with a jolt that snapped Grayson back from the edge of something he didn't have a name for. Not sleep. He hadn't slept on a plane in 11 years. Something closer to the focused stillness he used before a difficult room. The kind of quiet that wasn't peace but preparation. He didn't move when the cabin erupted into the usual chaos, seatbelts clicking, overhead bins banging, the collective impatience of 200 people who had been sitting still for 2 hours and were done with it. He sat. He watched the aisle from his peripheral vision. He counted. Richard Calloway was already standing, yanking the overhead bin open with the casual authority of a man who had never once waited for anyone. He pulled down both rolling bags, his first, then Adeline's, set them in the aisle in front of him, and turned to Adeline with his hand extended. Up, he said pleasantly. She unfolded from the window seat. She moved carefully the way someone moves when they have learned that occupying too much space too quickly is how incidents begin. She reached for her carry-on. I've got it, Calloway said, and his hand closed around the handle before hers did. He said it nicely. He always said things nicely. That was the whole trick. They joined the slow press of the aisle. Grayson counted to 7 and stood. He was 4 rows behind them, close enough to keep visual and far enough that Calloway's peripheral scan, and the man did scan. Grayson noted a slow rotation of his head every 30 seconds, checking wouldn't tag him as a pattern. Marcus materialized at Grayson's left shoulder from somewhere in coach. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His presence was the message, I'm here. We're moving. What do you need? Right? Grayson angled his chin toward the front of the plane. Lena confirmed. Marcus tapped his watch twice. Yes. The jet bridge felt longer than it was. The suit was keeping Adeline close, not touching her technically, but close enough that the gap between them was less than a natural distance. A management gap. She was carrying her own bag now. At some point, he'd transferred it back. Her head was down, her pace matched to his, and from the back they looked exactly like what Calloway needed them to look like, a couple tired from travel moving in easy sync. Grayson had 3 seconds of doubt, not about his plan, about her. She'd said yes on the plane. She'd taken the napkin. She'd held it. But 40 minutes of altitude and determination could dissolve against the concrete reality of an airport arrival, a man beside you who knew every tell, you wore a body made, and a world outside the terminal that had failed you enough times that hope had started to feel like just another trap. He'd seen it before, not with Adeline, but with others in other circumstances, where the moment of rescue arrived and the person flinched back into the familiar damage because the familiar damage was at least predictable. He couldn't control that. What he could control was making sure Lena was exactly where she was supposed to be. They cleared the jet bridge. The terminal opened up noise movement. The wide concrete sprawl of Concourse H. Calloway slowed slightly to check his phone. Adeline slowed with him automatic. And then she saw Lena. Grayson saw the exact moment it happened, a fractional hesitation in Adeline's stride so small that only someone watching for it would catch it. Lena was 12 feet ahead, standing near the gate agent's desk, blue lanyard around her neck. Coffee cup in her left hand, looking at her own phone with the body language of someone waiting for a connection flight. Unremarkable. Invisible to anyone not looking for her. Adeline's chin lifted by a degree. Calloway was still on his phone. I need to confirm the car, he said to no one. Then to Adeline without looking up, don't wander. And this was the moment. Grayson felt it the way you feel a pin dropping in a quiet room. Adeline took 1 step toward Lena. Calloway's hand came out without him even looking. Just a reflex, the long-practiced reflex of containment, and caught her wrist. I said don't wander. I was just going to throw away my cup, Adeline said. He looked at her then, a full look. The kind of look that measured and assessed and found whatever it was looking for. Give it to me. He took the empty cup from her hand, dropped it in a nearby trash bin without breaking his phone call, and returned his hand to her arm. Grayson had stopped at a departures board 6 feet away, eyes up, reading nothing. His jaw was tight. Calloway moved them toward the main corridor, and the window was closing. Lena drifted naturally to the left, repositioning without seeming to reading the shift. She caught Grayson's eye for half a second. "I see the problem," and gave the faintest shake of her head. "Not yet," Marcus murmured at Grayson's shoulder. "There's a family restroom bank 30 meters ahead on the right. If she can get free for 45 seconds..." "She can't," Grayson said quietly. "He's not letting go of her arm." "Then we need to give him a reason to." Grayson thought for 2 seconds. Then he pulled out his phone and sent Lena a single-word fall. Lena was a professional. She had been working for Grayson for 6 years, and in that time she had talked her way into and out of situations that would have made most people retire early. She received the text, pocketed her phone, and in the next 4 steps manufactured the kind of stumble that looked entirely accidental. Her foot catching the edge of a floor mat, her coffee cup going sideways, her arms shooting out for balance, and connecting solidly with Richard Calloway's laptop case. The case hit the floor. The impact was sharp and loud enough to turn 3 heads. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Lena was already crouching, gathering pressing apologies like she was offering cash. "I'm so clumsy. I've been traveling all day. Let me..." Calloway's attention snapped to his laptop case. His grip on Adeline's arm loosened by 4 inches, not released but loosened, as he bent toward the case, his eyes on the latches checking for damage. 4 inches was enough. Adeline moved. Not running. She was too smart for that, and Grayson understood in that moment just how intelligent she actually was, because she walked. Measured, unhurried steps, the exact pace of someone who was heading toward the restroom. Nothing alarming, nothing that would register to the casual eye as escape. She didn't look back. She didn't look at Grayson. She looked straight ahead, and she walked toward the family restroom corridor like she'd been given permission she didn't need. Lena had Calloway fully occupied, apologizing, examining, chatting with the self-deprecating warmth of a woman who was absolutely no threat to anyone. Marcus had positioned himself at the corridor entrance without appearing to his body a natural traffic break. Grayson walked after Adeline. She was inside the corridor around the corner from Calloway's sightline when she stopped. Just stopped. Her hand went flat against the wall. Her shoulders were rising and falling too fast. "Keep walking," Grayson said quietly, reaching her side. 30 more seconds. "He's going to notice," she said. Her voice had a fracture in it now, the first fracture he'd heard since the plane. "He always notices. You don't know how fast..." "Marcus has the corridor. You have 40 seconds. 40 seconds isn't..." "Adeline." He kept his voice even, not urgent, not pushed. "Look at me." She looked at him. "Do you want this to be different?" he asked. She stared at him, her jaw worked. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I've wanted..." She stopped, pressed the back of her hand against her mouth for a moment. "Then, he has my passport, he has my credit cards, he has everything." "That's why Lena is here," Grayson said. "She has a bag in the car, new phone, cash. She's going to take you somewhere safe tonight, and tomorrow you're going to have options. Real options. But I need you to move right now." From the main corridor, they heard it. Calloway's voice, the pleasant social voice, rising just slightly the way it rose when things were not conforming to expectation. "Adeline," her face went white. "Now," Grayson said. She moved. Lena appeared at the far end of the corridor. She had extracted herself from Calloway with the smoothness of a card removed from a deck, and Adeline walked toward her fast, and Lena's arm went around her shoulder with a practiced, natural ease, steering her right toward the elevator bank and the parking structure beyond. Grayson turned around and walked back into the main corridor. Calloway was standing 8 feet away. He was a good-looking man in the way that expensive things were good-looking, assembled with care, maintained with effort, designed to impress. He was looking at the corridor entrance with an expression that was still calibrated to social pleasantness, but underneath the calibration, Grayson could see it starting to slip. "Have you seen a young woman?" Calloway asked him. "Dark hair, cream blouse." She stepped away, and "Restroom," Grayson said, jerking his chin toward the sign. "She said she'd be a minute." He held eye contact without blinking, and added in the bored tone of a fellow traveler, "Women." Calloway's eyes stayed on him for 1 second too long. Grayson knew that look. He'd worn it himself. The look of a man running a calculation. Do I know this person? Why does something feel wrong? Should I push this? "Thanks," Calloway said. His voice was still pleasant. Grayson nodded and walked past him toward the main terminal, taking his time. Hands in his jacket pockets, posture loose. He made it 40 feet before his phone buzzed. Marcus, she's in the car, moving. He exhaled through his nose. One breath. Just one. Then his phone buzzed again. Marcus, Calloway's moving toward the restroom. He's going to figure it out in under 2 minutes. Grayson stopped at a departures board and typed back. How long until his security detail from Atlanta runs background on us? Marcus already running. Grayson, I just got something back on Calloway's firm. It's not commercial real estate, it's a shell. His actual income source is flagged in a 2023 federal filing. He's got ties to a trafficking network out of the Southeast. Adeline might not be the first person he's moved through an airport. Grayson read it once, then again. He stood very still for 4 seconds. Then he typed, "Get me everything tonight." He put the phone in his pocket and turned around. Calloway was 30 feet away, coming back from the restroom corridor, and his face had changed. The pleasantness was gone. Not replaced by rage. Men like Calloway didn't go to rage first. They went to cold. His eyes were scanning the terminal now with a different energy, methodical and flat, and when they landed on Grayson, they stayed. Grayson didn't look away. He walked directly toward Calloway, which was the last thing Calloway expected. He could see it in the slight recalibration of the man's posture, and stopped 2 feet from him with the unhurried ease of someone who had decided how this conversation was going to go before it started. "She's not in the restroom," Calloway said. It wasn't a question. "No," Grayson agreed. A beat. Calloway's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" "Phew, someone who noticed," Grayson said simply. The pleasantness came back then, a cold, controlled version of it, the social armor reassembled in real time. "I don't know what you think you saw, but Adeline and I know what I saw," Grayson said. "I saw it on the plane. I saw it in the terminal in Atlanta, and I've seen enough of it in my life to know exactly what it is." Calloway straightened. He was taller than Grayson by an inch, broader in the shoulders, and he used both of those things intentionally, leaning slightly into the space between them. "You need to tell me where she is." "I don't," Grayson said. "She's my fiancée. She has a medical condition. She needs her medication, and I have it." "She doesn't," Grayson said. "I asked." That cracked something, just for a moment, a flash of something real beneath the performance, something that had nothing to do with concern and everything to do with control. Calloway's jaw tightened. "You talked to her?" "I did. She doesn't always, she gets confused. She says things that aren't." "She's 20 years old," Grayson said, and he kept his voice completely level, because the level voice was the one that hit hardest, the one that left no room for argument. "She's 20 years old and she has bruises on her wrists, and she signaled a stranger for help in a crowded airport." "That's not confusion. That's the clearest communication I've seen in a long time." Calloway stared at him. Something behind his eyes was calculating, furiously angles leverage exposure. He was smart. Grayson had known he was smart. Smart was more dangerous than angry. "You have no legal right," Calloway began. "You're correct," Grayson said. "I have no legal right, but then neither do you." He let that sit for exactly 2 seconds. The 2021 complaint in Fulton County. The 2022 missing persons inquiry, the woman named Sarah Denham, 23 years old, last seen at Hartsfield Airport with a man matching your description. He watched Calloway's face, watched something there go very, very still. "Those aren't my rights, but they're interesting information." "You don't know anything," Calloway said, very quietly now. "I know enough," Grayson said, "and I know people who will find out the rest." A full silence between them. Around them, the terminal moved travelers' announcements, luggage wheels on tile. But in the 2 feet between Grayson Wolfe and Richard Calloway, everything had gone absolutely still. "She'll come back," Calloway said. The pleasantness was entirely gone now. His voice was flat and precise, the voice underneath all the other voices. "She always comes back. She doesn't have anyone else. She doesn't have—" "She does now," Grayson said. Calloway looked at him for a long moment, and then something happened that Grayson didn't expect. The man laughed, a short, quiet, humorless sound. "You think you've saved her," he said. "You have no idea what she's told me, what she's done. You think you know her from one flight?" He shook his head. "She'll destroy you. That's what she does." Grayson had heard it before. Not word for word, but the architecture was identical, the last move of a man who couldn't hold something with force, so he tried to poison the person who had taken it from him. Make the helper doubt. Make the victim sound broken, dangerous, complicit. It was textbook, and it was vile, and he was not moved by it. Get on your flight, Mr. Calloway, Grayson said, whatever flight that is, and don't come looking for her. Or what? Grayson held his gaze for 3 seconds. He didn't threaten. He didn't need to. 20 years had given him something no amount of money or charm could replicate, the absolute bone-settled certainty of a man who had never once made a promise he didn't keep. Calloway read it. Whatever he saw, it was enough. He picked up his laptop case, he straightened his jacket, and he walked toward the exit with his 2 rolling bags and his pleasant face reassembled, and not one backward glance, which was its own kind of tell, Grayson noted. Guilty men looked back. Men who were planning something didn't. He pulled out his phone immediately. Marcus, Calloway is leaving the terminal on foot. I want eyes on him for the next 72 hours. And I want everything on Sarah Denham. Marcus already on Denham. Grayson, Adeline's in the car. She's asking for you. He stopped walking. She's asking for you. In 11 years, Marcus had never sent him that particular sentence. Grayson stood in the middle of O'Hare Concourse H, with 1,000 people moving around him, and felt something shift in the architecture of the day. Not just the plan, not just the logistics, but something underneath all of it. Something that had started with 2 fingers pressed against a collarbone and had not stopped shifting since. He typed back, "Tell her I'm coming." He walked toward the parking structure. His steps were even. His breathing was even. His face gave nothing away. 20 years of practice. But somewhere behind the practiced surface, something that he'd walled off a very long time ago was knocking steady and insistent and entirely unwilling to be ignored. The elevator doors opened. He stepped in. When they opened again on level 3, Marcus was waiting beside a black SUV with the engine running, and through the tinted rear window, Grayson could see a shape, small, still facing forward. He walked to the car and opened the rear door. Adeline looked up at him. She was sitting with her hands in her lap, Lena's coat over her shoulders, and her face had done something in the last 20 minutes that he hadn't expected. Not collapsed, not gone vacant, but opened. The careful blankness was gone. What was underneath it wasn't peace, wasn't relief, wasn't even safety yet. It was rawer than any of that. It was the face of someone who had just put down a weight they'd been carrying so long, they'd forgotten what their own arms felt like without it. She looked at him and said, "He let me go." "He didn't have a choice," Grayson said. She nodded slowly, absorbed that. "Then he's going to come back. You don't know him. He doesn't just let things go, ever." Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. "He's going to find a way to Adeline." He got in the car and pulled the door closed. He looked at her directly. "Do you know who I am?" A pause. "No." "Good," he said. "That means he doesn't either." She stared at him. Something moved in her expression, not quite humor, not quite hope, something between the two. "That's supposed to make me feel better." "Eventually," he said, for the first time since a crowded terminal in Atlanta, Adeline Cole almost smiled. The car pulled out of the parking structure and into the gray Chicago morning, and Grayson Wolfe sat beside a young woman he'd known for less than 3 hours and felt with a certainty that had no logical basis whatsoever, that the hardest part of this was nowhere near over. He was right. What none of them knew, not Grayson, not Marcus, not Lena, was that Richard Calloway had not gone to the exit. He had walked 40 feet toward the exit, turned into a side corridor, and made a phone call that lasted 90 seconds. And the man on the other end of that phone call was not a lawyer, not a friend, and not anyone whose name appeared in any public filing anywhere. He was the reason Sarah Denham's case had gone cold, and he already knew what car Adeline was in. The SUV had been moving for 11 minutes when Marcus's phone rang. He answered on the second ring, listened for 4 seconds, and said nothing. Then he lowered the phone and looked at Grayson in the rearview mirror with an expression that Grayson had learned over 11 years meant that the situation had just changed in a direction nobody wanted. "We have a tail," Marcus said. Grayson didn't turn around. "Since when?" "Since the parking structure exit, black Escalade, 2 cars back. It's been matching every turn." Adeline went very still beside him. "He called someone," she said. Her voice was quiet and immediate, the way someone speaks when they're confirming something they already knew was coming. I told you he doesn't just let things go. She pressed her hands flat against her thighs. There's a man, his name is Decker. I've never met him, but Richard talks about him. On the phone late at night when he thinks I'm asleep. He talks to him when things go wrong. She paused. I'm the thing that went wrong. Grayson looked at Marcus. Options. I've got Danny 2 blocks north. We can split the car, run a redirect. No. Grayson's voice was flat. We're not splitting her off in an unfamiliar city with people we haven't identified yet. Keep driving. Maintain speed. I want to know how many are in that Escalade before we do anything. Marcus relayed the instruction through his earpiece. Adeline was looking at her hands. How much do you know about Decker? Grayson asked her. Enough to be scared of him, she said. Then she looked up. Richard performs cruelty. He's deliberate about it. It's a choice he makes, and he enjoys making it. She swallowed. Decker doesn't perform anything. Richard is scared of him. I could hear it in his voice every time they spoke. And Richard is not scared of anyone. That landed with weight. Grayson processed it. A man like Calloway constructed calculating, accustomed to being the most dangerous variable in any room, scared of someone else. That wasn't a hired security contact. That was something different, something with its own gravity. His phone buzzed. Lena from the front passenger seat had been running searches since they'd left the terminal. She turned and handed him her tablet without a word. One name, one photograph, one federal case number from 2019. Dismissed on a technicality. Victor Decker, 44, former military contractor, 2 tours, dishonorable discharge buried under so much paperwork, it took Lena's particular skill set to find the edge of it. Since 2017, privately employed. The kind of privately employed that meant he moved people and sometimes made people disappear for clients who needed both services and had the money to pay for discretion. Grayson handed the tablet back. 3 in the Escalade, Marcus said from the front. Driver plus 2. One of them is running something on a laptop. They're tracking the car, Grayson said. Marcus agreed. We've got a device somewhere, either planted at the airport or... He stopped. Or Adeline, Lena said quietly. Adeline's head turned. What? Your bag, Lena said not unkindly. Or your clothing, something he had access to before this morning. Adeline looked down at herself. For a moment, her expression moved through something complicated, violation, fury. The particular revulsion of realizing that the body you'd been trying to protect had been turned into a beacon without your knowledge. She reached up and unclasped a thin chain at her throat, a simple gold necklace with a small, circular pendant, and held it in her palm. He gave me this, she said, 4 months ago. He said it was his grandmother's. She held it toward Lena without another word. Lena took it, examined the pendant for 3 seconds, then looked at Grayson. The look said everything. Give it to me, Grayson said. He lowered his window 2 inches and dropped the necklace out as they passed a transit stop. Gone. Irretrievable. He raised the window. They'll know we found it, Marcus said. Good, Grayson said. I want them to know. Adeline was staring at the space where the necklace had been. He planned this, she said softly, before we even got on the plane this morning. He already had a plan if I... She stopped. He knew I was going to try something. He knew. He suspected, Grayson said. There's a difference. If he'd known, he wouldn't have let you out of his sight for 40 seconds in that terminal. He looked at her. You were smarter than he expected. That's why we're in this car instead of the other scenario. She looked at him. What's the other scenario? He didn't answer that, which was its own answer. Marcus spoke again. Escalade's closing distance. They made us drop the tracker, and now they're not bothering to hang back. How far are we from the Meridian building? Grayson asked. 7 minutes. Make it 4. The car accelerated smoothly. Adeline gripped the door handle not from fear of the speed he sensed, but from the need to hold something solid. He understood that. He'd felt it himself in different cars in different cities in the early years before he'd built enough infrastructure around himself that the solid thing was always within reach. Where are we going? She asked. Somewhere Decker's laptop can't follow us, Grayson said. The Meridian building was a 40-story commercial tower in the West Loop that, to anyone looking at public records, housed a mid-sized consulting firm on floors 12 through 15. What those records didn't show was that Grayson owned the building outright through a holding company that had never been connected to his name in any document that existed outside of a single encrypted server. The private entrance was on a side street. The elevator required a code that changed every 72 hours. And the three-floor residents on floors 38 through 40 had exactly one way in and one way out, which was the way Grayson preferred all of his spaces. They pulled into the side street entrance with 40 seconds to spare before the Escalade rounded the corner behind them. The gate closed. Marcus was already out of the car and moving. Adeline stepped out and looked up at the building. Just once briefly, the way a person looks at something when they're trying to assess whether they've traded one kind of trap for another. Grayson noticed. He didn't blame her. "You can leave at any time," he said. "The front entrance is on Randolph. I'll have Lena get you a cab and whatever cash you need." She looked at him. "You're giving me an out." "I'm giving you a choice. That's different from an out." A beat. Something moved in her expression, something that was still learning to trust the difference between those two things. Then she picked up her car and walked toward the entrance. Lena took her upstairs. Grayson stayed at the car with Marcus. "Escalade stopped at the corner," Marcus said, looking at his phone. "They're not coming in. They're waiting." "Decker's not stupid enough to move on a building he hasn't scouted," Grayson said. "He's establishing perimeter. He wants to know what I am before he decides what to do about me. And when he figures it out," Grayson looked at the corner where the Escalade sat. "When he figures out what I am, he's going to have a very different conversation with Calloway about whether this particular situation is worth what it's going to cost." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You're banking on Decker being mercenary enough to price this out." "Aren't they all?" "Not always," Marcus said. He said it carefully in the voice he used when he was about to say something Grayson wasn't going to like. "Lena's deeper background on Decker came back while you were in the car. The Sarah Denham case, she didn't just go missing, Grayson. They found her 18 months later. She was alive. She's in witness protection." He paused. "She testified. The case was thrown out on a chain of evidence problem, but the testimony exists, and Decker knows it exists, which means he has a very specific reason to make sure that women who get out of Calloway's orbit don't stay in a position to do the same thing." The air between them went heavy. "He's not here to retrieve her," Grayson said. "No," Marcus said. "I don't think he is." Grayson stood with that for 5 seconds. 5 full seconds, which was 4 more than he normally spent processing information before moving. Then he straightened. "Get Danny and whoever else is on call. I want this building covered on all 4 sides. And I want a secure line to Thomas Reyes in the next hour." Marcus's eyebrows moved, just slightly. Thomas Reyes was a federal contact, the kind of contact that Grayson had spent years cultivating and rarely used because using him meant exposing proximity, and proximity to federal architecture was something a man in Grayson's position managed with extraordinary care. "You're bringing in Reyes. If Denham's testimony exists, Reyes can get to it faster than we can. And if Decker knows we have access to it," Grayson looked at the corner again. "It changes his math." He went upstairs. Lena had put Adeline in the main sitting room with tea she probably didn't want and a change of clothes that were close enough to her size. When Grayson walked in, Adeline was sitting with the tea untouched and her hands wrapped around the mug like it was the only warm thing in the room. She'd changed into a simple gray pullover and she'd taken her hair down and she looked without the armor of the cream blouse and the tight hair about 17 years old. She looked up when he entered, read his face in under a second, which told him that 8 months with Calloway had finally calibrated her ability to detect a shift in a room's atmosphere. "Something happened," she said. "We have more information about Decker," he said, and he sat across from her, not beside her. He'd learned over many years that proximity during difficult information was a judgment call. Too close felt controlling, too far felt cold. He split the difference. "I need to ask you some things, and I need you to be honest with me. Not for my sake, for yours." She nodded. "Did you ever hear Calloway mention Sarah Denham?" The mug shifted in her hands. A small movement. "He mentioned a Sarah once. He said she was a girl he'd tried to help, and she'd fabricated a story about him and ruined a business relationship. He said it like," she stopped, "like it was boring, like she was a case study in ingratitude." She looked at Grayson. She wasn't fabricating. No, Grayson said. She wasn't. Adeline closed her eyes for 2 seconds. When she opened them, there was something older in them than there'd been on the plane. Not harder, just older. Like she'd aged through something in those 2 seconds that had been waiting to catch up with her. How many? She asked. We don't know yet. But I'm not the first. No, he said. You're not the first. She set the mug down carefully. Precisely. The way someone moves when they're managing something internally, that would be catastrophic to drop. I used to tell myself I was unlucky, she said. That I'd made a bad choice, trusted the wrong person, missed signs I should have caught. I went through the whole list, what I did wrong, what I could have done differently. What kind of person ends up in something like this? She looked at him steadily. It was easier than the alternative. What's the alternative? That he chose me specifically, she said. That it was deliberate. That there were others before me and there would have been others after me, and I was never unlucky. I was just selected. Her voice didn't crack when she said it. It was somehow worse that it didn't crack. How long ago was Sarah? 2022. So there might be someone between her and me. Grayson said nothing. There's someone between her and me, Adeline said. It wasn't a question. He held her gaze. We're looking. She stood up and walked to the window and stood there with her back to him, arms crossed, looking out at a city she didn't know. A long silence stretched between them, and he let it because some information needed space around it before a person could begin to carry it. He told me once, she said, not turning around, that I was too smart to be as interesting as I was. He said it like a compliment. I thought it was a compliment. She laughed, a short, airless sound. It was a threat. He was telling me he'd already figured out how to use it. Grayson's phone buzzed. He looked down. Marcus Decker's out of the Escalade. He's on the sidewalk. He's on his phone and he's looking at the building. Then a second message 10 seconds later. Marcus Grayson, he's not looking at the building. He's looking at the camera above the side entrance. He knows where the camera is. He's been here before. Grayson stood. Adeline, step away from the window. She turned, reading his face again, and stepped back immediately without argument. Good instincts. Or learned ones. Either way. He typed to Marcus, what's Reyes' status? Marcus calling now. Lena appeared in the doorway. The second man from the Escalade just walked into the building lobby, she said. He's at the front desk. He's asking for the consulting firm on 12. What name did he give? He said he has a package delivery. There is no package delivery scheduled today, Grayson said. Lobby security knows that. He looked at Lena. Tell them to hold him in the lobby and call the building management number. Not the emergency line, the management number. Decker will be listening for emergency response. He looked back at Adeline. Come with me. He moved her to the interior room, no windows, one entrance, the room he'd designed specifically for situations that he'd always hoped wouldn't arrive. She went without hesitation, which meant either she trusted him or she was out of the energy required for resistance. He suspected it was somewhere between the two. What's happening? She asked. Decker sent someone inside. To do what? Grayson looked at her. He made a decision, a clean, deliberate one, that she was not a person who should be managed with softened information. Softened information had been done to her by an expert for 8 months, and it had nearly destroyed her. She deserved the truth delivered straight, and she could handle it. To confirm you're here, he said, and to establish a path in before they decide on next steps. She absorbed that, and next steps means we're not waiting to find out. He pulled out his phone. Marcus is Reyes on Ma. Marcus, patching, now. A click, a beat of static. Then a voice unhurried, precise, the voice of a man who had learned over 30 years of federal work that urgency was usually a choice and calm was always a strategy. Grayson, Thomas Reyes, it's been a while. It has, Grayson said. I need the Sarah Denham testimony file, the sealed one from the Callaway case. And I need you to know that Victor Decker is currently standing outside a building I own in the West Loop with a man inside the lobby and an Escalade at the corner. A silence, not a surprised one. The silence of a man recalibrating a day that had just become more complex. Decker, Reyes said. I know of him. He's been adjacent to 3 cases in the last 4 years. Adjacent enough to be a problem, not close enough to be a charge. Another pause. Is the denim woman connected to your current situation? Adeline Cole is connected to Calloway the same way Denham was, Grayson said. And she's sitting in my building right now. How old at 20? A beat. I can get Denham's file to you in 2 hours, Reyes said. But Grayson, if Decker is already on site, 2 hours is a long time. I know. What do you need from me in the short term? I need a federal interest established on Adeline Cole's safety. Something with enough visibility that moving on her becomes a headline rather than a clean operation. Reyes was quiet for 5 seconds. That's not a small ask. I know what it is, Grayson said. I also know what Decker does with women who get out of Calloway's network and end up as potential witnesses. I know what happened to Denham, and I know that she was lucky, and I know that luck is not a security strategy. Another silence. Longer. Give me 45 minutes, Reyes said. The line went dead. Grayson lowered the phone. Adeline was sitting on the edge of a chair, back straight, watching him with the focused attention of someone who had decided that paying close attention to information was now a survival strategy rather than a habit. The federal government is going to know I exist, she said. A specific person in the federal government is going to know you exist, Grayson said. One who has a reason to want Calloway's network exposed. And until 45 minutes from now, there are 6 people between you and that lobby who are very good at their jobs. She nodded, slow. Then tell me about Sarah Denham. What happened to her after? Grayson looked at her. He considered deflecting. He didn't. She got out. It took 18 months, a federal case, and a handler she trusted. She's somewhere safe now under a different name with a life that's actually hers. Adeline was quiet. She made it, he said. I heard you the first time, Adeline said. But her voice had changed by half a degree. Something in it had loosened. Something that had been locked for 8 months and maybe longer. I'm just deciding whether to believe it. His phone buzzed. Marcus. Lobby man just left. Package excuse didn't hold. He walked out, got in the Escalade. All 3 are pulling away from the corner. Grayson frowned. That was wrong. That was the wrong move for Decker to make. You didn't pull away when you had the position. You held it. You waited. You made the other person sweat the waiting. Pulling away meant either Decker had what he needed, which was confirmation that Adeline was in the building, or it meant he was repositioning for something that didn't require proximity. Neither option was comfortable. He typed, don't celebrate. Find out where they went. Marcus already on it. Then Lena's voice from the doorway, calm, contained with the particular quality it took on when she was reporting something she'd rather not report. Grayson, Calloway just checked into the Langham, 4 blocks from here. The room went quiet. Adeline's head turned toward the door. Calloway, 4 blocks. Checked in, which meant he wasn't catching a flight back to Atlanta. Which meant he'd never intended to catch a flight back to Atlanta. Which meant the whole performance at the airport, the pleasant voice, the pleasant face, the walking away, had been exactly that. A performance, a reset, a move on a board that Calloway had been playing longer than Grayson had realized. He wasn't retreating. He was setting up. He knew where we'd go, Adeline said. Her voice was very quiet. I don't mean he tracked the car. I mean... She stood up and now her hands were not shaking. They were completely still, which was somehow more alarming. He knew what kind of person would help me. He knew the type. He did this on purpose. She looked at Grayson with an expression that was not panic. Panic would have been easier, but something colder and more clear. He let me go with you because he wanted to know who you were. I was bait. I was still bait even after I got off the plane. The word landed like something physical. Grayson stood very still. Because she wasn't wrong. She wasn't wrong in the architecture of it, the deliberate, patient, many-stepped architecture of a man who had done this before and learned from each iteration was more sophisticated than Grayson had initially calibrated. He had looked at Calloway and seen an abuser, a predator, a man with a sealed complaint and a constructed image. He had not looked far enough past that to see the strategist. She had. She'd lived inside the strategy for 8 months. She had just understood the board faster than he had. He looked at her, and for the first time since a crowded terminal in Atlanta, he said something he didn't say often and meant completely. You're right, she looked back at him. And in her eyes, beneath the exhaustion, beneath the fear, beneath 8 months of compressed survival, something sharp and unbroken looked back. Then we need to be smarter than him, she said. Yes. What? Grayson said. What does smarter look like? He looked at her for 3 seconds. Then at Lena. Then at the phone in his hand where Regis's number was still on the recent calls list. It looks like letting him think he's winning, Grayson said, until we're ready to show him exactly how wrong he is. Outside 4 blocks away, Richard Calloway was ordering room service at the Langham and making his second phone call of the afternoon. And this time he wasn't calling Decker. He was calling someone whose name had never appeared in any filing, any database, or any search Lena had run. Someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. And his name was going to change everything. The name came back in 23 minutes. Not 45. 23. Which meant Thomas Reyes had already been moving on this before Grayson called, which meant the federal interest in Richard Calloway's network was older and more active than Grayson had been told. That particular detail sat in the back of his mind like a splinter he didn't have time to dig out yet. Lena handed him the tablet. One name flagged in red at the top of Reyes' document. Senator Paul Whitmore, Illinois. 12-year incumbent infrastructure committee chairman, the kind of political longevity that required very specific and very expensive maintenance. Grayson read the flagged entry twice. Whitmore's name appeared in a 2022 financial disclosure, cross-referenced with 3 shell companies, 2 of which shared a registered agent with Calloway's real estate holding firm. It wasn't a smoking gun, it was the smell of smoke through a closed door. But it was enough to explain why the Calloway case had been thrown out on a chain of evidence problem that any first-year prosecutor should have caught. Somebody had caught it and let it go deliberately. Somebody with the reach to touch a federal case without leaving fingerprints. Somebody who was now 4 blocks away in a city where Whitmore's office was on the 14th floor of a federal building 3 miles north. Calloway isn't operating alone, Grayson said. Lena nodded. He never was. The shell companies go back 6 years. Whitmore's been covering the legal exposure since at least 2020. Does Reyes know about Whitmore? The flag is in Reyes' own document, Lena said carefully, which meant either Reyes was showing his hand deliberately trusting Grayson with information that could burn them both, or Reyes was testing him, seeing what he'd do with it, seeing whether Grayson Wolfe, whose own history was not exactly a monument to civic virtue, would sit on a senator's name or move on it. Grayson set the tablet down. Adeline was in the doorway. She'd been listening. She hadn't pretended not to. A senator, she said. Yes. Richard had dinner with a man in a suit 2 months ago, she said, in Atlanta. He introduced him as a business associate. He made me stay in the bedroom the whole time. She paused. Afterward, he was different, looser, the way he got when something had gone his way. She looked at the tablet from across the room. Could I see a photo? Oh. Grayson looked at Lena. Lena pulled up Whitmore's public profile image and turned the screen toward Adeline. Geez. 3 seconds of silence. That's him, Adeline said. The room temperature seemed to drop by a degree. You're certain? Grayson said. I saw his face when he left, she said. Richard walked him to the elevator, and I came out of the bedroom and I saw him. He looked at me like... She stopped, chose her words, like I was furniture, like I was something in the room that Richard owned and therefore didn't require acknowledgement. Her jaw tightened. I remember his face because that look is hard to forget. Grayson picked up his phone. Reyes answered on the first ring. Whitmore, Grayson said, a pause. Long enough to confirm that the name was not a surprise. Where are you getting that? From a witness who can place him in Calloway's apartment in Atlanta 2 months ago, Grayson said. In person. The silence this time was different, denser. The silence of a man recalculating the value of what he'd just been handed. Is this witness stable? She's 20 years old and she just spent 8 months inside Calloway's operation, Grayson said. She's one of the most stable people I've met in a long time. Can she testify? Adeline was watching him. He looked at her and raised his eyebrows, a question that was entirely her choice to answer. She didn't hesitate. She nodded. Yes, Grayson said. Then I need her in a formal protective custody arrangement before tonight, Reyes said. Because if Whitmore knows Calloway's network is exposed, the window closes fast. These people don't leave loose ends, Grayson. You know that. I know that, Grayson said, which is why I'm calling you instead of handling this the other way. Another pause. Reyes understood what the other way meant. He'd always understood. It was the unspoken architecture of their arrangement. Grayson had resources and reach that federal bureaucracy could not replicate. And Reyes had legitimacy and protection that Grayson's world could not manufacture. They had never examined the arrangement too closely, which was how it had survived. "I'll have an agent at your location in 90 minutes, Reyes said. "Someone I trust, not a task force, one person. Keep it quiet until I can establish the protective order." 90 minutes, Grayson repeated. "Can you hold the building for 90 minutes? Grayson looked at Marcus, who was standing in the hall with his phone and his particular expression of controlled readiness. Marcus gave a single nod. "Yes," Grayson said. He ended the call. Adeline was already ahead of him. "I need to give a formal statement," she said. "When the agent arrives, I want to." She said it clearly without performance. "I've been trying to find a way out for 4 months, not just physically out. I've been trying to find a way to make it matter, to make these 8 months mean something other than time I lost." She looked at him steadily. "If there's a senator involved, if there are other women, if what I know can do something," she stopped. "I want to do the thing that actually helps." Grayson looked at her for a moment. At 20 years old, 8 months out of the worst experience of her life, in a city she didn't know, in a building owned by a man she'd met 5 hours ago, she was talking about what she could do for other people. He thought of the kitchen that smelled like burned coffee. He thought of being 17 and not understanding what he was seeing until it was too late. He thought about how different things might have been if anyone had been paying attention. "Okay," he said. His phone buzzed. "Marcus. Grayson, Decker's Escalade is back. Different corner north side this time. And there's a second vehicle, sedan dark blue, parked on the east. They're triangulating the building." He typed back, "How many total, Marcus?" "At least 5 counting what I can see. Could be more in the sedan." 5, 90 minutes. Those two numbers did not fit together comfortably. He walked to Marcus in the hall and kept his voice low. "Decker's not going to wait 90 minutes once Calloway tells him what's at stake with Whitmore. He's going to move before a federal agent arrives." Marcus looked at him steadily. "So we give him a reason not to move." "What kind of reason?" "The kind that costs him more than it's worth to try," Marcus said. He held up his phone where a name and number were already on the screen. Victor Decker's personal cell. "Lena found it 20 minutes ago. It's clean, not a burner. He's been using it for 2 years, which means he thinks nobody knows it." Grayson looked at the number. "You want to call him?" Grayson said. "I want you to call him," Marcus said, "because there's a specific thing you can say to a mercenary with a private number who thinks he's anonymous that will make him pause. And pausing is all we need." Grayson took the phone. He dialed. It rang twice. "Who is this?" Decker's voice was low, flat, and completely unsurprised, the voice of a man who had long ago stopped being caught off guard by anything. "My name is Grayson Wolf," Grayson said. "I think you know who that means." A beat, 3 seconds. "I know the name." "Then you know that I don't make calls like this unless I've already decided how the situation ends. I'm calling you as a courtesy." "A courtesy?" Decker repeated, flat, testing the tone. "You're sitting in an Escalade on the north side of a building I own in the West Loop," Grayson said. "Your associate is in a dark blue sedan on the east. You sent one man into the lobby earlier who didn't get past the desk. You've been here for," he checked his watch, "71 minutes, which tells me you're thorough, but you're waiting for an instruction that hasn't come yet, which tells me Calloway is still deciding." A silence, longer this time. "Here's what I want you to tell him," Grayson said. "Tell him that Thomas Reyes's office has an active federal interest established on the woman in my building. Tell him that Paul Whitmore's name is already in a document that exists in more than one location. And tell him that I have a witness who can place Whitmore in Calloway's apartment 2 months ago." He paused, and then asked him whether what he's paying you is worth what comes next. Dead silence. "You have nothing," Decker said. But the certainty in his voice had shifted barely, but Grayson heard it the way you hear ice beginning to change under weight. "I have everything," Grayson said. "I've had it for the last 40 minutes. I was just deciding whether to use it." Another pause. "What do you want?" "I want you to pull both vehicles off this block and not come back," Grayson said. "That's all. Whatever arrangement you have with Calloway, renegotiate it in light of the current information. I don't have any interest in you, Decker. You're adjacent. I'm interested in the center. And if I don't, Grayson let the silence answer that. 4 full seconds of it. I'll be in touch, Decker said and ended the call. Grayson handed the phone back to Marcus. Watch the vehicles. What do you think he does? He calls Calloway. Calloway calls Whitmore. Whitmore has a panic response that tells us exactly how scared he is. He walked back toward the interior room. Watch for the Escalade to move in within 15 minutes. If it doesn't, we have a different conversation. It moved in 9. Marcus appeared in the doorway with his phone held up live feed from the building's exterior camera. Both vehicles pulling out simultaneously the particular kind of coordinated withdrawal that signaled a decision made from the top, not the bottom. Decker had called Calloway. Calloway had called Whitmore. And Whitmore had made a choice that told Grayson more than any database or financial disclosure could have. He'd pulled the dogs back, which meant he was not going to fight this with force. He was going to fight it with the thing he knew best, the machinery of institutions of filings and delays and procedural obstruction, the long, patient suffocation of a case by a man who had learned to use the law like a private weapon, which meant the 90-minute window was more important than ever. Adeline, Grayson said. She appeared from the interior room immediately. She'd been standing just inside the doorway, listening again, making no pretense of not listening. The vehicles moved, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. That's not good news, she said. Is it? It means they're changing strategy, Grayson said. It means Whitmore's involved now, and Whitmore doesn't use Escalades. He uses lawyers and judges and people who know how to make things disappear through official channels. She absorbed this without flinching. How long do we have before that starts? Until Reyes's agent arrives and gets your statement on record, we're in a window, Grayson said. Once that happens, the official record exists. It's harder to make a person disappear when what they know is already documented. Harder, she said, not impossible. Nothing is impossible for the right amount of money and the right amount of influence, Grayson said, but we're going to make it expensive enough that the cost outweighs the benefit. She looked at him for a long moment. You're very calm about this. Would it help if I weren't? A pause, then unexpectedly, no. Actually, no. She let out a breath. Richard was calm too, but his calm was, it was a lid on something. I could always feel what was underneath it. She studied Grayson's face with the close precision of someone who had spent months learning to read people for survival. Yours is different. How? It's not a lid, she said. It's just the actual temperature of the room. She said it like she was surprised by her own observation. I don't know if that makes sense. It does, he said. Lena appeared. Reyes moved the timeline. Agent is 40 minutes out, not 90. She's already in the city. She was on another case nearby. Adeline asked. Special Agent Claire Moran, Lena said. 12 years in. She handled the Denham interview. She looked at Adeline directly. She's good. She'll know how to take your statement without making you feel like the one on trial. Something in Adeline's posture changed, just slightly. The particular relief of hearing a specific detail that makes an abstract fear suddenly manageable. Then Grayson's phone buzzes, not Marcus, not Reyes, a number he didn't recognize. He answered, Mr. Wolf. The voice was smooth and carefully modulated, the voice of a man accustomed to being the most important person in every room he entered. I think we should talk. Grayson said nothing. He let the silence do its work. My name is, I know your name, Senator, Grayson said. A pause. Recalibration. Then you know I'm a man who prefers to resolve situations before they become problems for everyone involved. That's an interesting way to describe what you've been doing, Grayson said. What I've been doing, Whitmore said, is managing a complicated set of relationships that a person in your position should understand very well. You're not exactly operating inside conventional structures yourself, Mr. Wolf. No, Grayson agreed. I'm not. Which is why I don't have constituents to answer to donor relationships to protect or a sealed deposition from a trafficking witness that could end a career. He kept his voice level, conversational almost. You do. A longer pause. The woman is scared, Whitmore said. She's been through a trauma and she's not thinking clearly. Whatever she's told you. She placed you in Calloway's apartment 2 months ago, Grayson said, in person, clearly enough to describe the color of your tie. Silence. She's a credible witness, Grayson said. She's young, she's compliant, and she's sitting 40 minutes from a federal agent who has already worked one Calloway case and would very much like to work another. And Senator, the fact that you're calling me personally from what I assume is a personal line tells me that you are significantly more frightened right now than you want to sound. The silence stretched. Grayson could hear Whitmore breathing slow, controlled, the forced calm of a man holding himself back from the edge of something. What do you want? Whitmore said finally. The smoothness was still there, but thinner now, stretched. I want exactly what I already have, Grayson said. I want the girl safe, and I want what she knows on record. I don't have a personal agenda beyond that. I have no political ambitions and no financial interest in destroying your career. He paused. But I will not be the obstacle between this and where it's going. You're calling me because you think I can be negotiated with. I'm telling you that you've misread the situation. Everyone can be negotiated with. Not today, Tim, Grayson said. He ended the call. Lena was staring at him. Marcus was staring at him. Even Adeline in the doorway was staring at him. You just hung up on a United States senator, Marcus said. Yes. He's going to retaliate. He's going to try, Grayson said, which is why the next 38 minutes matter more than anything we've done today. He looked at Adeline. When Moran gets here, I need you to tell her everything. Not just Whitmore, not just Calloway. Everything. From the beginning. Every name, every location, every dinner, every phone call. You overheard every instruction you were given. Everything. Adeline nodded once, firm. Are you ready for that? He asked. She straightened, and in the straightening, the spine going long, the chin lifting, the hands going still at her sides, he saw something he hadn't seen since the airport. Not the careful blankness, not the survival armor. Something underneath all of that, something that had been waiting behind 8 months of compression for a room safe enough to exist in. I've been ready, she said quietly, for a very long time. 32 minutes later, Special Agent Claire Moran arrived. She was 41, compact, with the particular quality of stillness that came not from passivity, but from the decision to absorb, rather than project. She shook Adeline's hand without preamble, looked her in the eyes, and said, I want you to know that nothing you tell me today is going to be used against you. You're not a suspect. You're a witness, and you're a survivor, and the only thing I need from you is the truth. Adeline looked at her for 3 seconds. Then she sat down and she started talking. She talked for 40 minutes without stopping. Names, dates, locations, the dinner with Whitmore, the late-night calls with Decker, the way Calloway had systematically dismantled her access to money, family identity, the architecture of it, piece by piece exposed to the fluorescent reality of an official record. She spoke with the steady, deliberate clarity of someone who had been organizing this testimony in her own mind for months, waiting for a room that was safe enough to say it out loud. Grayson sat outside in the hall and listened to the sound of her voice through the closed door. Not the words, just the cadence and thought about the weight that was coming off her with every sentence, the gradual lightening of someone who had been carrying something alone for so long that they'd forgotten it was supposed to be shared. His phone buzzed. Marcus Calloway checked out of the Langham 40 minutes ago. He's not at the airport. We're tracking his credit card, and it just pinged at a private car service on Michigan Avenue. He's moving. Grayson sat up. Direction Marcus North. And Grayson, he bought a one-way train ticket to Milwaukee under a secondary name. Lena found it in a booking system. He's running. Grayson stood, running. Richard Calloway, who had never once left a loose end, who had built an entire system of control around the certainty that other people's fear was more powerful than their courage. Richard Calloway was running. Because Adeline was talking. Because a 20-year-old woman he had selected and contained and used as bait was sitting in a room 38 floors up and dismantling 8 months of careful construction with nothing but the truth spoken clearly to the right person in the right room. He typed to Marcus, let him run. Alert Reyes to the Milwaukee ticket. If he crosses state lines, it becomes federal flight. That's better for us than stopping him here. Marcus, you sure we could? Let Reyes take him. Clean, official. Nothing that can be thrown out on a technicality this time. A pause, then understood. Grayson leaned back against the wall and looked at the closed door. Inside, Adeline's voice continued steady, clear, unbroken. Building the record piece by piece, the way someone rebuilds something that was taken apart without their permission. Putting it back together differently this time. Stronger. On her terms. He had walked into Terminal C that morning running 4 minutes behind schedule, with 3 agenda items in Chicago, and zero intention of changing the trajectory of anyone's life, including his own. He thought about that now. He thought about the kitchen that smelled like burned coffee and the boy who hadn't understood, and the 26 years he'd spent carrying that specific weight without ever finding the right place to set it down. He wasn't sure this was the right place either, but it was closer than anything else had ever been. His phone buzzed one more time. Not Marcus, not Ross, not Reyes, not Whitmore. A text from a number he didn't have saved with an Atlanta area code sent 6 minutes ago, which meant sent while Adeline was in the room with Moran, while Calloway was in a car heading north, while Decker was somewhere deciding whether the math still worked. 4 words. She trusted the wrong man. Grayson stared at the message. He looked at the closed door. He thought about 2 fingers pressed against a collarbone in a crowded terminal. He thought about a woman who had looked across 200 strangers and chosen the most dangerous one in the room, not because he was safe, but because she was smarter than anyone had given her credit for, and she had made a calculated decision in the half second she had available. He typed back 1 word, no, and he put the phone in his pocket and waited for the door to open. The door opened at 6:47 in the evening. Adeline walked out first. Agent Moran followed 1 step behind with the careful proximity of someone who understood that the person in front of her had just done something enormous and needed space to feel the weight of it before anyone else put their hands on the moment. Grayson stood up from the wall. Adeline looked at him and said nothing for 3 full seconds. Her eyes were dry. She hadn't cried. He'd listened for it through the door and heard none. What he saw in her face now was not relief, not triumph, not the particular lightness he'd imagined. It was something more complicated than any of those things. The expression of someone who had just excavated 40 feet of their own history and laid it out under fluorescent light and was now standing in the aftermath of that, covered in the dust of it, figuring out what came next. Done, he asked. Done, she said. Moran stepped forward and handed Grayson a card physical paper, which told him she'd done her research and understood that he didn't leave digital trails when he could avoid it. Mr. Wolf, we're going to need a formal location for Miss Cole tonight. Somewhere I can confirm is secured. She stays here, Grayson said. Moran looked at him with the particular assessment of a federal agent measuring exactly how much she trusted a man whose name appeared in 3 closed investigations and 0 convictions. With respect, Grayson said, your bureau had a sealed Calloway case thrown out in 2019 on a technicality that required inside knowledge of the evidence chain. This building has not been compromised. Your field office may have been. He held her gaze. I'm not making an accusation. I'm making a calculation. She stays here tonight. Tomorrow, when Reyes has the protective order formalized, we discuss next steps. Moran held his gaze for 4 seconds. Then she looked at Adeline. Are you comfortable with this arrangement? Adeline didn't hesitate. Yes. All right. Moran capped her pen. Reyes will have the preliminary order by midnight. Calloway's ticket to Milwaukee has already triggered a federal flag. He's not going to get far. She turned back to the door, then stopped, turned around once more and looked at Adeline directly. What you did today, the statement you gave, it's thorough, it's credible, and it's going to matter. She said it plainly, without performance. For more people than just yourself. Adeline absorbed that, nodded once. I know, she said quietly. That's why I did it. Moran left. The room was quieter after she was gone, the specific quiet of a space from which high pressure has just been released. Lena was in the kitchen. Marcus was at his post. Grayson and Adeline stood in the hallway with 8 hours of the most complicated day either of them had lived through sitting between them like weather. Are you hungry? Grayson asked. She blinked, like the question was in a different language. Yes, actually, yes. I haven't eaten since... She stopped, calculated. Yesterday, he repeated. Heated meals were sometimes a management tool, she said. And she said it simply the way she'd said everything since the car, stripped of shame, just factual. 8 months of experience filed under information rather than identity. If I'd done something that bothered him, or if he thought I was getting too comfortable that meals were... She stopped again. That's a sentence I'm going to have to stop finishing for a while. You can finish it, Grayson said. You can finish whatever you need to finish. There's no right speed for this. She looked at him. You've said that before, or something like it, on the plane. She tilted her head slightly. You talk to people like you know what they need to hear before they know they need to hear it. Occupational habit, he said. What occupation? He almost smiled, the complicated kind. She almost smiled back. And in the almost smile, the first real one he'd seen from her, even incomplete something in the room changed. Not dramatically, not with any cinematic swelling of feeling, just the smallest shift of temperature, the way a room changes when a window is open after being closed for too long. Lena made food, real food from the building's kitchen that Grayson almost never used himself, pasta bread, something warm and uncomplicated. Adeline ate at the kitchen counter with both elbows on the surface, which was the posture of someone who had been told too many times to sit up straight and was quietly, deliberately done with that. She ate the way people eat when they've stopped monitoring themselves, which was the first genuinely unself-conscious thing Grayson had seen her do since the terminal. He sat across from her with coffee and let the silence be what it was. His phone buzzed. Marcus. Calloway detained at Milwaukee Intermodal. Federal agents. He didn't run, he actually tried to talk his way through it. Can you believe that? Talked all the way into cuffs. Grayson read it twice. Then he showed the screen to Adeline without comment. She read it, set the fork down, picked it back up, continued eating. How do you feel? He asked. I'm trying to figure that out, she said honestly. I thought I'd feel something specific when it happened. Relief maybe, or I don't know, something definitive. She shook her head. It just feels like the next thing. That's what it did, Grayson said. The next thing, she repeated. What is the next thing? Tonight you sleep. Tomorrow Reyes's protective order. After that, he looked at her. After that, it's yours to decide. That's the point. She looked at the counter. I don't have anything. My apartment in Atlanta was in his name. My bank accounts were linked to his. My phone was monitored. She listed it without self-pity, purely inventory. I have the clothes Lena gave me and whatever was in my carry-on, which is 3 items and a broken zipper. The zipper's fixable, Grayson said. She looked up, the almost smile again, slightly less almost this time. That's your response to me describing being homeless. The rest of it's fixable too, he said. Lena is going to spend tomorrow making calls. Reyes can expedite document replacements through the protective arrangement. There are organizations, specific good ones, that deal with exactly this kind of financial reconstruction. He held her gaze. You're going to have choices, Adeline. Real ones. That's not something I'm saying to make you feel better. That's the next 30 days, practically speaking. She was quiet for a moment. You've done this before, she said, not just today. The infrastructure of it, the knowing who to call, the knowing what comes next. You've moved someone out of a situation like this before. He didn't answer immediately. Not exactly like this, he said finally, but close enough that I knew what I was looking at when I saw it. Who was she? The question landed quietly. He picked up his coffee, set it down. My mother, he said, a long time ago, and I was too young to know what I was seeing, and by the time I understood it, the moment had passed. He looked at the counter surface. That's the thing about those moments, they don't come back. You get one window. Adeline was very still. Is that why you turned around at the airport? She asked. Yes, he said. No elaboration, just the word which was enough. She looked at him for a long time. Not with pity, he would have closed the conversation immediately for pity, with something that felt more like recognition. Two people who had been shaped by the same category of loss from different angles, arriving at the same moment by completely different roads. I'm sorry, she said, about your mother. Don't be, he said. Be something different. Be the reason that particular weight finally goes somewhere useful. He looked at her directly. It is, by the way, going somewhere useful. She picked up her fork again. You are going to be terrible at accepting gratitude, she said. Historically, yes. I'm going to say it anyway. I know. Thank you, Grayson. He held her gaze. You did the hard part, he said. You asked, and then you walked, and then you talked for 40 minutes to a federal agent when everything in your nervous system was telling you it wasn't safe. I drove a car and made phone calls. You turned around, she said simply. He had no answer for that. That didn't prove her point. So he said nothing, which was its own kind of answer, and she seemed to understand that too. His phone rang, not a text, a call. Reyes. The Whitmore situation moved faster than expected, Reyes said when Grayson answered. His office issued a statement 20 minutes ago distancing him from Calloway. Standard language limited professional contact, no knowledge of alleged activities cooperating fully. He paused. He's not going to be the one who falls first. He's going to cooperate in exchange for separation, which means he confirms everything Adeline described. Her credibility just got corroborated by a United States senator trying to save his own career. Grayson looked at Adeline. She was watching him reading whatever she could from his side of the conversation. He tilted the phone slightly toward her and put it on speaker. Ms. Cole, Reyes said, I want you to hear this directly. The statement Whitmore's office just issued doesn't exonerate him. It is, however, an indirect confirmation of everything you told Agent Moran this afternoon. The case against Calloway is significantly stronger tonight than it was this morning. Adeline leaned toward the phone. What about the other women, the ones before me? We're working on that, Reyes said. Sarah Denham has already been contacted through her handler. She's willing to speak again given the current circumstances. And we have a name from Denham that suggests there's a third woman from 2020 who left the country. Our people are working on locating her. Her name, Adeline asked. A pause. We don't have confirmation yet. When you find her, Adeline said, tell her that the window opened. Tell her it's not too late to walk through it. Silence on the line. Even Reyes, 30 years of federal work, every variety of human wreckage he'd witnessed, was quiet for a moment. I'll make sure that message gets to her, he said. After the call ended, Adeline stood up from the counter and walked to the window. She stood there with her arms at her sides, not crossed, not braced, just standing, looking at the city that had been someone else's city 8 hours ago and had quietly, incrementally, over the course of one extraordinary day, begun to become hers. Grayson's phone buzzed one more time. Marcus, you need to see something. He went to the hall. Marcus held out his own phone, a news alert 12 minutes old from a Chicago Tribune push notification. The headline was 4 words and a name: Calloway arrested in Milwaukee federal charges. Below it already, a secondary alert: Senator Whitmore cooperating in trafficking investigation. It had taken less than 4 hours from the moment Adeline started talking for the walls to begin coming down. That was the thing about well-constructed systems of control. Grayson knew they looked impenetrable from inside, but they were often one honest voice away from collapse. Because the whole architecture required silence, required the person inside it to stay convinced that speaking was more dangerous than not speaking, required the lie repeated often enough that no one would believe her if she did. She had spoken. They had believed her. The walls were coming down. He went back to the kitchen. Adeline was still at the window, her back to the room. He stopped in the doorway. The line. She turned. He held up Marcus's phone. She read the headline. He watched her read it twice, the same way she'd read his napkin on the plane, carefully, like she was checking whether what she was seeing was real. Then she lowered her eyes to the secondary alert, and he watched her read Whitmore's name in print in a national news headline connected to a word she had been living inside for 8 months. Her hand came up and pressed flat against her mouth. This time she cried. Not the collapse he might have expected, not the spectacular breaking open of someone who had held themselves together past their limit. Just tears, quiet and steady, the specific kind that come not from sorrow, but from the release of something that has been braced against impact for so long that the impact finally not coming is itself too much to contain. He set the phone on the counter and didn't move toward her. He'd learned from hard experience from his own history with the kind of pain that needed room, that the worst thing you could do to someone who was finally feeling safe enough to fall apart was to rush in and catch them before they'd finish falling. Sometimes falling apart all the way was the thing that needed to happen. She cried for 4 minutes. Then she wiped her face with the back of her hand, straightened and turned around. Sorry, she said automatically. Don't, he said. She looked at him, nodded. Don't. Don't. She took a breath, long, slow, the breath of someone refilling a space that has been compressed for a very long time. What happens to me now? She asked. I mean, actually, tomorrow and the week after. And tomorrow Moran comes back with the protective order paperwork, Grayson said. You sign it. It gives you a legal identity shield for up to 18 months during the active investigation. Lena has already contacted 2 organizations, one in Chicago, one in New York, depending on where you want to be, that specialize in exactly your situation. Financial reconstruction, housing counseling. If you want it, legal advocacy. They're good. I've vetted them both personally. She blinked. You vetted them. This afternoon, between the Decker call and the Whitmore call, she stared at him. When did you have time? I had Marcus make the calls, he said. It's what Marcus does. From the hallway, Marcus's voice, it's what I do. Adeline laughed. It came out of her the way laughs do when they've been absent for a long time, slightly surprised, slightly unsteady, entirely real. She covered it with her hand briefly, then stopped covering it. Let it be what it was. New York, she said when she'd recovered. I want to go to New York. There's a professor from before. She wrote me a recommendation for a program I never applied to because Richard said I wasn't ready. Her voice went flat for exactly 1 second on his name, then leveled out. I'd like to prove him wrong about that. What program? Architecture, she said, and the word carried something in it, not just a field of study, but a reclamation. A thing she had been told she was not ready for, not good enough for, not allowed to pursue now, said out loud in a room where no one was going to agree with any of that. I'm good at it. I've always been good at it. He said I wasn't. She stopped. He said a lot of things I believed for too long. Architecture, Grayson said. Building things. The irony is not lost on me, she said. He almost smiled. She caught it. And for a moment, in the kitchen of a building in the West Loop on a Tuesday that had rewritten both of their lives, they looked at each other with the particular understanding of 2 people who have been through something real together and come out the other side still standing. Lena appeared. Rooms ready on 39. Clean clothes, toiletries, everything. She looked at Adeline. You should sleep. You've given everything you had today. The rest of it will still be here tomorrow, and you'll be better equipped to deal with it after 6 hours of horizontal. Adeline looked at Grayson, something in her expression that was a question she didn't quite know how to form. You're safe here, he said. That's not something I say to everyone. I'm saying it to you because it's specifically and completely true. She picked up her carry-on, still held together with the safety pin zipper still broken, and followed Lena to the elevator. At the hallway entrance, she stopped and turned around. Grayson? He looked up. The signal, she said. In the airport. I didn't know if it would work. I didn't know if you'd understand it. I didn't even know why I looked at you specifically. She paused. I just knew that out of everyone in that terminal, you were the only one who was actually looking. He held her gaze. Most people aren't, he said. I know, she said. That's why I picked you. She disappeared around the corner. He heard the elevator open, heard Lena's quiet voice saying something he couldn't make out, heard the doors close. He stood in the hallway for a moment. Then he walked back into the kitchen, picked up his cold coffee, and stood at the counter where Adeline had eaten her first real meal in more than a day. The pasta was half finished. The bread was gone. Her fork was still on the counter where she'd left it, and beside it was a small square of paper torn from the corner of a grocery receipt Lena had left on the counter, on which Adeline had written 2 words in small, careful handwriting while he'd been in the hallway with Marcus. Thank you. Not for the call he'd made, not for the building, or the agent, or the vehicles he'd moved, or the senator he'd outmaneuvered, or the 40-year-old contact he'd burned a piece of to put her testimony on record. Just thank you for turning around. He folded the paper once and put it in his jacket pocket. Marcus appeared in the doorway. Calloway's lawyer is already in Milwaukee, he said. High-end, Atlanta firm. It's not going to be a quick case. It never is, Grayson said. Whitmore's going to try to insulate himself completely, cooperate on Calloway, protect his own exposure. Let him try, Grayson said. Adeline's statement covers more than Calloway. And when they find the 3rd woman, if they find her... When, and Grayson said. Marcus looked at him for a moment. You're different tonight. No, I'm not. Yes, you are, Marcus said with the bluntness of 11 years and total job security. You're settled. You've been running on a specific kind of unfinished business for a long time, and something about today shifted it. He paused. I'm not asking about it. I'm just noting it. Grayson looked at the folded paper in his jacket pocket. Go home, Marcus. I'm on until midnight. Go home, Grayson said again. I've got the building. Marcus looked at him for one more second. Then, good night, Grayson. He picked up his jacket and left without further commentary, which was one of the many things Grayson had always appreciated about him. The building was quiet. Grayson sat down at the kitchen counter in the same seat where Adeline had eaten, and for the first time in a day that had started in a terminal and moved through airports and parking structures and federal calls and a senator's panic and a mercenary's retreat, for the first time in all of that, he was still. He thought about what she'd said at the window, that he was the only one who was actually looking. He thought about how much of his life he'd spent being the person in the room who saw things other people didn't see, and how he'd used that ability for years, for decades exclusively, in the service of his own survival and his own interests. How seeing had become a professional skill and never a human one, Bo. How he'd built walls around every impulse that the being in that burned coffee kitchen had felt until the impulses had stopped arriving, and he'd told himself that was maturity. It wasn't maturity. It was the same damage wearing different clothes. He reached into his jacket pocket and unfolded the small square of paper. Thank you. He looked at it for a long time. Then he took out his phone and opened a contact he hadn't accessed in 4 years. A woman named Eleanor in Portland, who had nothing to do with his business and everything to do with his history, a social worker who had once, a long time ago, asked him why a man with his resources and his particular ability to read people wasn't doing more with it. He'd told her it wasn't his problem. She'd told him with the patient certainty of someone who knew him better than most that he'd change his mind eventually. He started typing. You were right. I changed my mind. I need to know more about how to do this properly. Not just once. Ongoing. Can we talk? He sent it, set the phone face up on the counter, waited. Her reply came in under 2 minutes, which meant she was still the person she'd always been awake at odd hours, phone always nearby for exactly this kind of call. I've been waiting 4 years for that text. Call me whenever you're ready. He set the phone down. Outside Chicago was doing what cities do at night, humming, moving lit up in every direction, with the particular energy of millions of lives in forward motion. Somewhere in that grid, Richard Calloway was in a federal processing facility trying to charm his way out of something he had finally run out of room to escape. Somewhere to the north, Victor Decker was renegotiating his own math and finding that the numbers no longer worked in his favor. Somewhere in a federal building 3 miles away, Thomas Reyes was signing paperwork that would formalize the protection of a 20-year-old woman who had done the bravest thing Grayson had witnessed in 20 years, not the speaking, though the speaking was brave, but the looking. Across a crowded terminal through 200 people who saw nothing, finding the one person who was paying attention and deciding in half a second to trust that. On the 39th floor, Adeline Cole was asleep for the first time in 8 months, without one ear tuned to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. And in the kitchen, Grayson Wolfe sat with a piece of paper the size of his palm and understood with a clarity that had taken him 43 years and one morning in an airport to arrive at that some things in a person's life are not resolved, they are redirected. The burned coffee kitchen didn't go away. The boy who hadn't understood didn't disappear. But the weight of them, the specific gravity of a failure carried alone for 26 years, could be turned into something that moved forward instead of pressing down. He folded the paper and put it back in his pocket. He wasn't a different man tonight. Marcus was wrong about that. He was the same man finally doing the thing he had always been capable of and had spent decades refusing to do. Seeing. And then when it mattered, turning around. That was all it had taken. That was in the end, the whole of it, one person paying attention in a room full of people who had decided not to, and a 20-year-old woman with the courage to look directly at him and ask without a single word. She had chosen correctly. She had always known she would.